The question is that the bill be now read a second time, and I call the member for Berowra.
Thanks, Deputy Speaker. I rise to speak on the Counter-Terrorism legislation amendment Prohibited Hate Symbols and Other Measures Bill 2023. I support the bill, noting that it reflects the same intent as a bill produced by the Leader of the Opposition and myself some 8 months ago. If the best time to move was in the past, then the next best time to move is in the present. So I welcome this bill, although it is delayed. We could have done this 8 months ago. I also welcome the Attorney-General's announcement yesterday that he'll amend the bill to include a nationwide ban on the Nazi salute, which again was in keeping with my original bill. So this is welcome, although delayed, although amended, it is welcome and it is supported by the Coalition. In speaking on this bill, I first want to speak about the Australian character, because this bill reflects what we stand for as Australians. My friend the member for McNamara has rightly said we oppose anti-Semitism not just because it's the right thing to do, but because it's the Australian thing to do. And it is the Australian thing to do because we are a wonderful multicultural people. We're one of the few nations in the whole world that has never formally discriminated against or persecuted Jewish people. In fact, Australia has always been a welcoming place for Jewish people. It's part of the reason Jewish Australians love this country so much. And that generosity has been returned 100-fold, with a community that Sir Robert Menzies once said was not only in Australia, but of Australia. Jewish Australians participate and give back. We volunteer and we serve. If you go to any Commonwealth War cemetery, you'll inevitably find Stars of David among the Christian crosses. And go to the Australian War Memorial and read and speak the names of some 40,000 men and women who gave their lives to defend the world against German Nazism and Japanese militarism, both of whom were autocratic, despotic regimes that believed in a vile ethos of the supremacy of one race over another. This is the Australian tradition of service, personified by the Anzacs of the Second World War. Jewish Australians, like those Anzacs, love this country. We're a small community of about 100,000 people, a good-hearted community, but who have loved and continue to love this safe and welcoming land. But Australia is not immune from the forces shaping the world. Technology that spreads misinformation and encourages echo chambers. And the far right and the far left brood on imagined conspiracies. Anti-Semitism has been rising in our country for some time. We've witnessed the emergence of ultra-nationalists on the far right who use the Nazi symbol and invoke Nazi catchphrases and salutes. And on the far left, we see those who think Jewish people are an embodiment of power and privilege. The far left believe their anti-Semitic arguments are somehow novel, but their arguments are as old as time itself. The Leader of the Opposition got it absolutely right when he said this is a time for moral courage and moral clarity. And we also know that such clarity inevitably emerges when so much is at risk. We saw that clarity earlier this week with the launch of a campaign in newspapers and online supporting the Jewish community and opposing anti-Semitic attacks. I commend all those who have added their names for this campaign so far and who've committed themselves to opposing anti-Semitism in all its forms. Let me encourage all fair-minded Australians to go to saynotoantisemitism.org and add your name to the list of Australians who are being counted at this time. This bill is another marker in our national commitment to an Australia that is fair and free, to an Australia where all people are entitled to the freedom of worship and, as importantly, the freedom to live free and free of fear. This bill tackles some of the cultural factors and practices that are associated with the far right. The lessons of history is that you discount the broodings and resentments of the isolated fruitcakes and nut jobs at your own peril. The Director-General of Security, Mike Burgess, has warned about the increase in grievance-based violent extremism when he said, and I quote, "As a nation, we need to reflect on why some teenagers are hanging Nazi flags and portraits of the Christchurch killer on their bedroom walls, and why others are sharing beheading videos. And just as importantly, we must reflect on what we can do about it." When I introduced the Criminal Code Amendment Prohibition of Nazi Symbols Bill 2023, ASIO wrote the following in a submission to the Senate committee that supported my bill. They said, "ASIO is aware that nationalist and racist groups use hate speech and extremist insignia in their recruitment and profile raising. Globally, there can be links between hate speech and hate-motivated crimes, including terrorism. The possession of extremist material is featured in many prosecutions of terrorist offences. The Senate Committee report on that bill noted, the Australian Security and Intelligence Organisation explained that Nazi symbols play a significant role among nationalist and racist violent extremist groups, both by signalling ideology and in-group belonging, as well as provoking or intimidating ideological opponents. ASIO further explained that symbols are an effective propaganda tool because they're easy to remember and understand. They can transcend language, cultural and ethnic divides. Creating, distributing and understanding them is not limited to a select few or one cultural or language group. As the Senate report noted, ASIO contended that symbols serve to promote cohesion among some nationalist and racist extremist groups and provoke their opponents. That's why it's important we're banning them. That's why this is an important piece of legislation. It not only bans the use of Nazi symbols and salutes, it will also ban the buying and selling of Nazi memorabilia. The Nazis do not deserve to be celebrated. I can't believe that that is a controversial matter in this country today. The Nazis are mass murderers. 40,000 Australian service personnel gave their lives to ensure the defeat of the Nazi regime and its allies. The glorification of Nazism desecrates the memories of those heroic Australians. The glorification of Nazism desecrates the memory of the 2/3 of the Jewish population of Europe, totalling over 6 million people who they exterminated. The glorification of Nazism desecrates the memory of the others they murdered as well, including the 1.6 million Polish citizens, the 5.7 million Soviet citizens, the 3 million Soviet prisoners of war, the 312,000 Serbs, the 220,000 Roma, the 250,000 people with intellectual disabilities living in institutions, the 70,000 so-called asocial, the 1,900 Jehovah's Witnesses, and thousands of homosexuals and political prisoners. The trade of Nazi memorabilia is a putrid trade. It's a celebration of infamy. To those who sought to complain about their losses from their investments in such memorabilia, my answer is whatever you've lost, it is nothing compared to what Jewish families have lost. Do not celebrate their murderers. Deputy Speaker, this bill rightly tackles the tactics and practices of the extreme right. But we've also witnessed in recent months the eruption of anti-Semitism of the extreme left. In many ways, the resentments and ideology of the extreme left is little different than the far right. It is as unoriginal in its thinking as the far right. The extremist green left, despite the far right, despise the far right, but they are little different. Like the far right, they believe they have special knowledge of how the world operates. Unlike the anti-vaxxers and conspiracy theorists of the far right, which are indoctrinated in the deep, dark corners of the web, the extreme green left, the Corbynite left, are mostly indoctrinated on Australia's university campuses. Australia's university campuses are the petri dish of anti-Semitism in this country. Earlier this year, the Australian Jewish University Experience Survey was released. It was undertaken by the Social Research Centre on behalf of the Zionist Federation of Australia and the Australasian Union of Jewish Students. The survey found that 64% of Jewish university students in Australia had experienced anti-Semitism at university, and 88% of those had experienced anti-Semitism on campuses over the preceding 12 months. 57% of Jewish students had hidden the fact they were Jewish at university. That is just extraordinary to me, who has always been proud of his Judaism and has always been a very public Jewish person, and that is what I want for every Jewish Australian. At 19% of Jewish university students had at some point stayed away from campus because of anti-Semitism. When anti-Semitism occurred, 85% of students didn't make a complaint. Those that did complain, 61% were satisfied with the outcome. And this is all before the events of the 7th of October. Universities have become the hotspot of anti-Semitism because of what's taught. It takes the modern lens of the left, seeing the world through the lens of the oppressed and the oppressors, that justice in the world is denied through inherited privilege, so the argument goes, and that privilege must be struck down. It's an argument that says, to quote one Green Left website, if you want to end white privilege, you must start with Jewish privilege. I believe we need a formal independent inquiry into anti-Semitism on our campuses, and I've called for that already. Deputy Speaker, anti-Semitism is not a new thing. It's a hatred that has endured through human history. It robs Jewish people of their God-given individuality. It attributes to Jewish people a series of tropes and attributes that deny us our humanity. The old hatred morphs in every generation, and sadly so it does with our own. But this bill, along with the actions and vigilance of countless Australians, will ensure that Australia meets this moment of moral clarity and does not flinch. I commend the bill to the House.